Welcome to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. Large enough to serve you, small enough to care. We got a great show on this Tuesday for you. We got old Jesse Palmer, and then Buddy Martin will join us as well. But we're going to kick off the show right now. We're going to go straight to the Titan MR hotline, and we're joined by good old Jesse Palmer. Jesse, good morning. How are you, buddy?
Dane, good morning, man. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, Jesse, when I have all the former players on, I've been doing this since about January, so I can get some pointers from you since you're a big-time broadcaster. But I like to go back to their days when they were growing up. You know, you grew up in Canada. We thought at one time you were the only Canadian that played here at the University of Florida, but we were told there may be one other guy. But did you play other sports other than football up in Canada?
Yeah, it's funny. I played basically every sport growing up. Ironically, didn't play hockey. So I might have been like one of 5 Canadians in the entire country that didn't skate great until I got older. But through school growing up, I played soccer, I played basketball, I played baseball, volleyball, track, tennis. I literally played everything. And my dad had played in the CFL. And so that was really sort of, like seeing his photos and trying on his jerseys at home. That was really sort of the impetus for me falling in love with the game of football. But I felt like a fish out of water for a while growing up there because of my lack of ability on the ice and the fact that people just didn't care as much about football as they do certainly down here in the States and certainly in the South.
Right. So playing football in Canada, now were your high school games 12-man games like the CFL, or what kind of format did y'all have?
So another funny thing, I actually didn't even play high school football because the quality of football where I grew up at high school, it wasn't very good. So it was this sort of the city league, and they had different age restrictions. My last couple of years in high school, I ended up playing on a traveling team where we had kids on the team that were essentially in their early 20s. And it was sort of like a hybrid rules. It was essentially Canadian rules. So it was 12 men. It was a 110-yard field. It was a wider field, bigger end zones, all those things, except we had 4 downs. That was the major modification. So Shane, as a former quarterback, I mean, you could appreciate the Canadian rules lend themselves to passing the football and scoring points. But if you add an extra down, it makes it just so much harder for defenses to stop you because you got receivers in unlimited motion and guys are running towards the line of scrimmage on the snap. It was funny in the league that I played in, there weren't a lot of teams that were throwing the ball. Everyone was still kind of old school running the football. So we threw it around a lot. And I remember getting recruited by Steve Spurrier, and he had said that, he thought that a lot of the route concepts that we used in high school or the city team that I was playing on actually mimicked a lot of what he was doing in the Gator playbook. So there might be some crossover and carryover. And I think some ways he was right.
Yeah, I want to get to Coach Spurrier recruiting you in a minute, but you said your dad played for the Ottawa Rough Riders. Did you grow up wanting to play in the CFL for the Rough Riders?
Yeah, I love the Riders, man. J.C. Watts was the quarterback for the Ottawa Rough Riders. Yeah, oh yeah. So he was that was my guy growing up. And my dad played with Conridge Holloway, who was a great Tennessee Vol quarterback. He played with him in Toronto. John Huffnagel played with him in Calgary. So Tom Clements, who was a great Notre Dame quarterback, played with my dad as well in Ottawa. So there's kind of these legendary figures, these great college players who had these great careers in the CFL. Those are sort of guys that I got to see in photos with my dad, but really growing up in Ottawa, J.C. Watts. That was the guy that I wanted to be. He was my hero growing up. Damon Allen was another one. Marcus Allen's young brother, who I don't think any pro quarterback now is thrown for more yards than him. Those were probably the guys that I wanted to emulate and I wanted to be.
Yeah, we're speaking with Jesse Palmer on the Titan MR hotline. So Jesse, you're coming out of high school up in Canada. How did you get involved? How did Steve Spurrier find you? Did y'all contact him? Because I've heard different stories. But what made you fall in love with the University of Florida?
So geographically, I mean, I thought I was going to end up playing in the Big Ten or the ACC or the Big East or somewhere closer to Canada where I was playing football. And of course, back then there was no social media or anything like that. So you really, as a Canadian, it was hard to get recruited. We really had to focus more on kind of word of mouth advertising. And I'd gone to Michigan's camp and I'd gone to Penn State's camp, and I'd done pretty well and sort of had generated a little bit of buzz for myself in those areas geographically. And my dad, who was also my head coach, he once said to me, hey, we should just send tapes out to the best passing schools in the States and then just see if they answer, because we have to set a ceiling for what our expectations are. Of course, back then, it was old school. Like, you had to make a VHS tape, you had to dub it. The quality was awful. There was like static, and there was like, it was ambient noise. It was awful, the quality of the tape. But at the time in 1996, of course, the Gators were going to win a national championship. Danny Werfel was on his way to win a Heisman Trophy. They were throwing the football over the yard, and it was like Hilliard and Riddle Anthony and Jacquez Green. And that was one of the 5 schools that we ended up sending tapes to that were throwing the football a lot. And it was amazing, because literally weeks later, I got a phone call from Steve Spurrier down in Gainesville, and that's what kind of got the ball rolling.
That's very cool. So I assume, like most guys that are being recruited, the head coach doesn't in-home visit. Did the head ball coach make a trip to Canada?
There was no way. No, it's like, I think anything below, if it was below 60 Fahrenheit, he wasn't going to come and visit that. There was no chance. So it was during the season, and I'd had a bunch of phone conversations with him, and then I flew down in October for my official visit, and it was homecoming in '96. They were playing the LSU Tigers, and Florida must have won the game like 60-3 or something. And I think and Danny threw like 6 touchdowns. And I remember sitting in the end zone. It was a day game. My dad and I are there. Never been to a place in an environment like the Swamp, in a home game in the SEC. It was just amazing. And I was essentially, outside of the weather part, the football part, I was sold almost immediately.
Good stuff. Okay. So you get to the University of Florida. Talk a little bit about your career. Obviously, you were part of the rotating quarterbacks at times, with Doug Johnson and Rex here and there. Talk a little bit about what that was like.
Yeah, it's interesting. People ask all the time. I think one of the reasons why it worked, and one of the reasons that I sort of enjoyed it, was because I never really saw myself as being a streaky quarterback. I didn't feel like I was the type of guy that really had to get into a rhythm. I could sort of go into games and come out. And of course, playing quarterback for Coach Spurrier, you knew that at any point in time in any game, regardless of what the score was, you might come out of the game based on a decision or a throw you make. So we did it all different types of ways. Doug and I rotated every snap against Tennessee in '98. Later that year, we went every series against Kentucky. We went every quarter. Rex and I rotated in all different types of ways, during the 2000 season when we won the SEC championship. So we did it in a lot of different ways. You just always knew, I think that, you go into the game, you're prepared, you're going to play. You don't know how much you're going to play, but even if you threw an interception, you might come out of the game, but the other guy was going to throw an interception at some point too. So you were going to get a chance to go back in. So you just always had to be ready at any point in time playing for Coach.
So when you got here playing American football, was it difficult for you to adjust not having guys running around in those crazy motions like y'all did in Canada?
Yeah, and I remember so I enrolled in the spring of '97. I remember having a practice, and then Coach, we ended up going down inside the 5-yard line. We did like a 7-on-7 inside the 5. And I felt claustrophobic. I'm down there, and there's nobody moving, and the end zone, it's so small, and you got 22 guys all crammed into this small little area. And Coach is calling fade routes, and I'm throwing the thing 12 yards out of bounds. And, and Spurrier's just looking at me like, what are you doing? And I remember thinking to myself, this is what sport am I playing? This is completely different than what I was doing up in Canada. And I think that, to me, outside of obviously the speed of the game and the quality of the athletes and the quality of the players and my teammates that we had, getting down to the end zone. Out in the field, it was fine. Getting down closer to the red zone, I remember thinking to myself, in scrimmages, dude, we got Fred Taylor. Let's just hand the ball off 3 times. You don't need me to make a fool of myself throwing the ball. Let's just turn around and hand it off to 21, and we'll just go from there.
Yeah. So, you wore number 7 here. Was that your number growing up? And did you feel any pressure having to wear number 7 after what Werfel did?
So I'd worn 7 since I was 8 years old playing, and John Elway was really my favorite player growing up as a kid. So, that was something in the recruiting process that coach and I had talked about what number we could wear. And he said, look, I'm not going to retire the number. You want to wear 7, you can wear 7. And certainly I had an appreciation for the legacy that Danny had left. But I honestly didn't feel so much pressure that way. I kind of knew I was just going to be my own player. The number had meant a lot to me. I really identified with it. And honestly, fans and teammates and coaches and everybody involved, it never once came up as a potential issue. People were happy to have me wear it. I tried to honor the number, and it was really, I think the Gator family really made me feel comfortable with that throughout that process.
When you look back at your Gator career, is there one game that stands out in your mind the most that you played in?
Probably Tennessee 2000, when we were on the road. It was early in the season. Obviously, and anybody surrounding around the program knows how big that Tennessee game is at the start of the year. It essentially used to be an eliminator for the SEC championship in week 3 of the season. And we had gone up, and it was a really good Tennessee team with a ton of NFL talent, like they always were, coached by Phil Fulmer, an excellent coach. We really had a back and forth game, like highly competitive, like they all were. And we won the game on a 2-minute drive. And there was that quote unquote controversial Jabbar Gaffney catch in the end zone, which obviously he caught, and everybody knows that. But it was this great game. It had a great finish, and there was over 100,000 people at Neyland Stadium. And you could, anytime we went up and played there, hate's a strong word, but the dislike for us in their stadium was almost like palpable. It was like humidity. It was like this, you just feel yourself walking through it. And on that 2-minute drive, I don't know if I've ever been in a louder stadium in my life. And then after Jabbar caught the ball, you could literally hear a pin drop. And it was one of the most remarkable experiences I've ever been lucky enough to be a part of. And it's obviously one I'll never forget.
That was a good one. Jesse, the Florida-Georgia game is a special game. It's the only other game at a neutral site. You had OU Texas there at the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
Just talk about, you cover that game a lot. I just think it's one of the best atmospheres in all of college football.
Yeah, I agree. It's very unique, as you said, Shane. I think you're right. When you can have 2 teams with tremendous tradition and tremendous history playing in a stadium where it's not a home and home, and, when you're there, you can literally draw a line right down the middle. I always love that about the Florida-Georgia game. It's red and black on one side, and orange and blue on the other side. And, it's 2 teams, 2 quality teams. The game means a lot. It's the game day atmosphere for all the fans and what that entails. And that's honestly something I've never had a chance to enjoy. But being on the field for that game obviously was really special as well. And, having covered the game and having called games in the SEC, talking to players from each team and asking them, would you want to keep that game the same, or would you rather do a home and home? Because remember, the unfortunate part of that is that Georgia players will never experience what it's like to play in the Swamp, and vice versa. Gator players will never go to Sanford Stadium. And if a lot of fans out there, if you haven't been to Sanford Stadium, it's pretty awesome. It's amazing. It's a great environment. But what makes college football so great are the traditions and the uniqueness of playing that game in Jacksonville and having that kind of game day environment, and what the game means to me, I think is really, really special.
You get drafted by the New York Giants in 2001. Kerry Collins was the main starter. Just talk a little bit about your career with the Giants, how you like that organization.
Fantastic. Sean Payton was my offensive coordinator. Jim Fossil was the head coach. And so I got to play for some great offensive minds. Kerry was tremendous. Jason Garrett was our other quarterback my first 3 years there. Phenomenal organization, tremendous tradition, great fans. And really a dream come true for me. I really grew up a big Chicago Bears fan, which made me like you more, especially considering
I didn't play very well in those games.
I had your football cards. Trust me, I was very well aware. You were outstanding. I'm still jealous. You and Rex Grossman, I'm still jealous of the Gator quarterbacks that got to inevitably play there. But New York was really tremendous. Great experiences, phenomenal teammates. We drafted Eli Manning in my 4th year. Got to play with Kurt Warner there as well in my 4th year. So we always had an amazing quarterback room. But one of the best organizations in the National Football League, again, in terms of traditions and kind of what they've done. And I was very lucky, and it changed my life. I mean, I almost got drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs twice. And oftentimes I wonder, what would have happened in my life had I not moved to New York City, which potentially provided me a lot of the opportunities from a career standpoint and a personal standpoint that I've had now. And I love Kansas City, and it's a great city, but you always, you play the woulda, coulda, shoulda game, and what might have happened had I gone that way instead. I count my blessings every day, because I've been here since I played here. I've been here since 2001 in Manhattan. I just love it.
You got 2 degrees from Florida, I believe, neither in journalism. And that's basically what you do now. And I want to talk a little bit about your career. How did you become so good at what you're doing when you didn't really study it in school?
Yeah, saying I'm good at it is high praise. I mean,
well, no, you're excellent.
I manage it. I mean, I get through every day. That's all. I'm just trying to survive every day. My roommate, Nick Shirelli, my teammate and my roommate, Nick Shirelli, was studying journalism and communications. And he was working his butt off. Like, I remember coming home back to the apartment after class, and he's putting a tape together, and he's editing it, and he's doing all this stuff. And at the time, I thought to myself, man, it's a lot of work. I'm just going to do marketing and political science. That's actually easier, I think, than doing journalism. So that was the thought process originally. I didn't know I enjoyed doing it until I was playing for the Giants. It was our off-season program, and Charles Way, Giants fans will remember Charles Way, was a running back, and he was sort of in charge of the player personnel and development. The Arena Football League had games in the spring and the summer, and they were looking for someone to do to do color for their arena games on the radio. And Jason Garrett had done it before. And he told me one day in the locker room, he's like, hey, man, if you're not doing anything, you should just try this. It's actually kind of fun. And I went out and did it. It was the New York Dragons and the New Jersey Gladiators. Those were the teams. And I would do it. And it was like, you'd watch film and you'd prepare for it throughout the week, a lot in the same way that we did as players. And it just, the X's and O's and the, sort of the studying and watching film, that stuff I loved. I felt comfortable being on camera. And I remember kind of in the off season doing that job and thinking to myself, you know what? When I'm done playing, this is totally something that I would like to try to do for my career. And I was lucky, afterwards to kind of follow it along. And it really kind of helped kind of spark the interest and led me to my career on TV.
I got to ask this for our female audience. You're the first professional athlete to be involved with The Bachelor. Talk a little bit about that experience. And do you think that helped you kickstart your career?
Glad you brought that up. I was the first athlete ever to be on reality TV. So I do want to take this opportunity to say, for anybody who's on television right now that was once playing sports in their life, you're welcome. Michael Strahan, you're welcome. Personally, from me. It was amazing. It was crazy. It was a wild experience. I wish I could sit here and tell you I knew what I was doing. And I totally knew that was going to help me later on in my career, because it absolutely has. I think football at ESPN and those opportunities with NFL on Fox and then ESPN, I think I was going to have that after I was done playing. Football has always been my wheelhouse, and it always will be. But I'd be foolish to say that my opportunities at Good Morning America, on the Food Network, Daily Mail TV, the Disney holiday specials, anything else that I've done in my career didn't have at least a little bit to do with my time on The Bachelor. So at the time, I was just doing it because I was 24 years old and I thought it was a really neat experience and it sounded fun. But no doubt, it was one of the best things I ever did for my career. There's no doubt about it, because it did put me in front of a different audience.
Yeah, we're speaking with Jesse Palmer on the Titan More Hotline. A few more minutes with Jesse. So let everybody know, I mean, you're a busy person. I mean, like you said, you're sometimes on Good Morning America. You got your Daily Mail TV show. Right now, there's not a whole lot of college football going on, but kind of give me the rundown of your schedule on a daily basis.
So it gets really busy. Obviously, the fall is the busiest time with college football. So, a typical week, honestly, looks like, wake up Monday morning, prepare and read the articles for Daily Mail TV, head to studio. You're in studio from 9 to 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock, get to the gym. 3 o'clock, you're watching film, prepping college football for the upcoming week's games till 7. Repeat that Tuesday, repeat it Wednesday. Thursday, go to studio for Daily Mail TV at 2 o'clock, get in the car, drive to Bristol. And then you're in studio at night in Bristol for the primetime game Thursday night, 11 p.m. drive back to the city. It's about 2 hours away. Repeat it again Friday, Daily Mail in the morning, ESPN at night, stay overnight. Saturday, obviously, is game day. So we're on air from noon until about 3 a.m. doing the college football final show. You get 3 hours sleep. You get back in the car Sunday, drive back to New York, and then you just repeat. And it goes on a cycle of 15 weeks. And then you start adding in the Who's In show when the college football playoff rankings start coming out. That's Tuesday nights, and that starts in mid-October. So, I mean, it's a zoo, but it's like anything else, Shane. It's like, too. It's like the quarterback mentality, just play the next play.
Right.
And that's kind of what I try to do with the schedule. If you look at the schedule at the beginning of the year, I would drive myself insane. So you just try to go every day, one at a time. What do I have to do? What am I doing?
Well, the good thing as an athlete, your whole life has been a schedule. So
right.
You probably haven't had to adjust very much. So do you enjoy being in the studio more, or did you like doing the color on the telecast?
Yeah, I fight back. I fight with it back and forth. I love being in studio because I feel like you get to touch on a lot of more different topics and a lot of the games and the storylines and the players of what's happening around the country. But you sort of treetop that. You can't really get into it too long. You're just kind of moving. But then I miss the games because I miss the energy of being there in the stadium, and I miss kind of really honing in on one game for 3.5 hours and the prep and the study and kind of breaking it down and watching the X's and O's of everything. So I love both. I mean, and I've done both. I've been lucky enough at ESPN in 14 years to do just studio, to do just games. There was 3 years with Brent Musburger where I was calling 2 games a week. And that was a crazy schedule. And then there's been, these last couple of years now, I've just been in studio 4 days a week. So I love each of them for different reasons. And I hope if I'm lucky enough to keep being able to do this, I hope I get the opportunities to continue to do both.
Last thing for you, your thoughts. Are we going to start college football on time this year? And I want to get your thoughts on Dan Mullen, what he's done in the 2 years that he's been here with the schedule that the Gators have. I think they should be in the talk of the 14 playoff.
Yeah. So first off, I'm extremely hopeful. I do think we're going to get it started. I think schools are going to take the precautions necessary. It's going to be costly. It's obviously very, very complicated. But I, in my heart of hearts, I think football is going to start on time. Now, I don't know if there's going to be any fans in the crowd, in the stands, especially at the beginning. But I do think the season's going to start on time. And secondly, I think Dan's done a phenomenal job in terms of how he's recruited, where he's bringing the team back. The expectation level, I think, I feel like we're getting back to where we used to be, sort of in the 90s when you played, in the late 90s through the Urban Meyer era, where I think fans now fans in Gainesville always think we're going to win the national championship every year, but I think those expectations are becoming more and more realistic, and I agree with it. I think with the talent we have, a quarterback like Kyle Trask and his abilities, and the schedule, I think most importantly. And I think that's one thing that fans and everyone has to look at the start of every year, especially in the SEC, with considering crossover opponents and traditional rivals and how daunting that is. I do think the Gators do have an opportunity to be one of those teams playing in the 14 playoff.
And the last thing, I ask all the people that play for the HBC, give us a quick little story, because everybody loves the head ball coach stories.
Yeah. So one of the all-time great Steve Spurrier stories, and I don't know how many people know this. Back in 1999, when Doug and I were rotating, we were in a practice. It was kind of a wet, soggy day, and just weren't executing the offense in practice the way the HBC had wanted. So literally in the middle of the practice, coach just decided that he was going to take over at quarterback and just show us how to do it, how the offense has to be run, the tempo and the mechanics, and you guys just aren't not completing any passes. You don't get it. So he comes in the game. Doug and I were impressed. He grabbed a helmet, he put a helmet on, and he went into the huddle, and we were up against our scout team defense, obviously. And so Spurrier goes out, and we're running up tempo, and we're going, and we're in bandit right, and just running blue slide everything, and guys are getting out. And to coach's credit, he was smart. Like, he knew, just let me get a couple easy completions early, and I'll get this thing going, and it'll help prove my point. So threw a couple screens, threw a Texas, a swing pass to a running back. He was just keeping it really safe and easy. And then he went blue slide steamers, which of course, the quarterbacks, so we got all verticals. We got guys running downfield. And this is really going to be the one where Spurrier is going to kind of show us. And our defense played kind of this big cover 2. And we had a freshman linebacker. His name was James Ferrier. That's Matt Ferrier's little brother. Matt was a great linebacker for the Steelers. James didn't get the memo that you don't pick off coach. And Spurrier dropped back, and we had a receiver running that covered 2 post down the middle of the field. Coach he threw it down there. Didn't come out great. It was kind of fluttering, and Matt or James high pointed the ball. He got back into a Tampa 2, picked it off, and then there was a convoy, and the defense scored a pick 6. And the place was going nuts. Everyone on our team couldn't believe it. And coach kind of slowly walked past us towards Doug and I, and we were just both looking at him what's he going to say now? And he just looked at us, and remember I told you it was wet a little bit, so the ball was a bit slick. And he kind of walked over, and he was mumbling to himself, and he was like, I just, sometimes slipsies. And he just jogged off, and we went on to our next period, and that was it. That's one of the all-time great Steve Spurrier stories that I remember during my time in Gainesville.
That's awesome. Well, Jesse, we appreciate you taking the time to join our show today. Good luck to you this year. Stay safe up there in New York, my man, and we're anxious to see you talking some college football soon.
I really appreciate it, Shane. Thanks so much for having me on, man. Stay safe.
Absolutely. That's Jesse Palmer joining us on the Titan MRI hotline. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Buddy Martin, just good old buddy who's on every Tuesday just talking sports. You're listening and watching the Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios. We'll be right back.
Time out! Time out! Hey! Time out! Time out! Time out! There we go. Good.
We want to take this moment to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills.
Let's give them something to cheer for now.
Our Gridiron sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. Titan MRI, Gainesville's only locally owned and operated MRI facility. The Best Restoration, Masters of Disasters. Pound Hurt, your preferred personal injury attorneys. Peachland Dental, Gator fans' first choice for dentistry in Port Charlotte. Our touchdown sponsors are Campus USA Credit Union, Celebration Point Town Center, The Digital Mortgage Guy, Adams Ribs, Cloud9 Spa, Gator Dominoes, Celebrate Primary Care, Center State Bank, Gator Bait Media, Damas Gainesville Chevrolet, Miapa Latin Cafe, Gators Dockside, Aikido America Martial Arts and After School,
Doreen Wiebe Realtor, Caldwell Banker MM Parish,
Radware, Wrap Spot,
and Style Cuts.
If you are interested in promoting your business on this show, you can visit our website, potupwithshane.com, and click on the Advertise button or call Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you for all the great businesses that support the show. Please remember, if you like what we are doing here, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
He's looking, still looking. He's going for the end zone. He's got a touchdown!
Welcome back to Pot Up with Matthews in the Morning from the Crime Prevention Security System Studios, large enough to serve you, small enough to care. I want to get to This Day in Sport, which is brought to you by the Best Restoration. Do you have COVID-19 concerns? Do what everyone is doing and hire the Best Restoration to fully sanitize and sterilize your home or office. Visit their offices this week for a free bottle of hand sanitizer when you mention the code Shane. Call them at 352-234-8994. This Day in Sports, let me get to it here. Back in 2013 at the French Open, Rafael Nadal is the first man to win the same Grand Slam title 8 times. Tremendous tennis player, no doubt. We want to thank Jesse Palmer for joining us. I get a kick out of the Coach Spurrier story. Slipsies, slipsies. He said that many a times. But now we're going to go back to the Titan MRI hotline And we're joined by the same guy every Tuesday morning, good old Buddy Martin from the Buddy Martin Show. Buddy, how are you, my man?
I'm well, and a really good interview with Jesse. Good to hear from him, and thanks a lot for putting me on behind him to follow that act, for crying out loud.
Well, buddy, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today, but obviously over the weekend there was some really sad news for the Gator Nation. Riche Caldwell, tremendous receiver here, was shot and killed down in the Tampa area. I think you had Coach Spurrier on your show last night, if I'm not mistaken, talking a little bit about Riche. I mean, he's one of the all-time great receivers here.
He is, and I started thinking about that when Steve said he's, one of the top 10, 12, 15, how he does, And so I remembered Riche, and I remember him being such a smooth route runner and really nice hands and capable of making the big play for you. So I looked up the exactly where he stood, and he is 12th all time in reception yardage. And a guy who was his brother obviously had a bigger impact. He's up there still, one of the top 5 or 6 guys of all time, and a guy that everybody remembers. Bubba broke some records. But gosh, when you look at the list of receivers, and again, RIP to Riche's family. By the way, Bubba's 3rd all time on the yardage list. You start thinking about the great receivers that they had at this school, and you had some as well. But you had one on last week that, I mean, it blows my mind to think about. Carlos Alvarez, still the all-time leader in yardage now. Yardage. Remember, they didn't play 12 games a year, and they didn't throw the ball that much after Ray Graves left. Doug Dickey didn't, and of course Carlos got hurt, and he only played 3 years. All right, he was not a freshman, couldn't play. What in the world could Carlos Alvarez have done with yardage if he'd have been playing all 4 years in a Spurrier offense?
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy what Carlos did in his career with John Reeves. And as you mentioned, they threw it a little bit, but he was injured quite a bit, didn't get to play. Back in his day, freshmen didn't get to play varsity football. So, I mean, the long list of receivers that we've had here is just really amazing. And you go back to, it's usually like the triplets. You had Ike, Riedel, and Kwesi when Dan was here. And then obviously the 3 that Rex had was Riche, Javar Gaffney, and Taylor Jacobs. And that was they threw it all around the park. But it's crazy when you go back and you look at all the All-Americans at that position that we've had under Coach Spurrier. And, I guess, Urban had a lot of really good receivers, but I don't think they put up the numbers that the Spurrier type receivers did. Because they didn't throw it quite as much. It was a different type of passing game. But, it's still amazing that Carlos Alvarez is at the top after all those guys come through here.
Interesting enough, when you look at the list, and most people probably have a hard time naming the top 5 or 6. You mentioned one guy that did play for Urban some, Dallas Baker, believe it or not, is 6 on the all-time yardage list. But Carlos is number 1. Javar Gaffney, who was probably one of the most underrated players ever at Florida. Bubba Caldwell, we mentioned. Riedel, you mentioned. Jack Jackson. Now, there's one for you. People forget about what a terrific player Jack Jackson was. He could run with the ball when he caught it. He was a tough receiver. Ike, you mentioned, who was played with Kwesi and Riedel. Riedel was a very unselfish guy, by the way. Then Willie Jackson, the son, is 9, and then Chris Doering, your man Chris Doering. How about that? Chris is still right up there in terms of touchdowns too. When you look at all time, he's number 1 in touchdown catches, 31. So talk about some of the guys you had a little bit, and talk about what made them special, and talk about how first of all you got to get them open, and then you got to hit them.
Well, my first year, buddy, we had when Coach Spurrier came in, our receiving core was Ernie Mills, Terrence Barber, Alonzo Sullivan, and Kirk Kirkpatrick was a tight end, not really a receiver. But Ernie had a really good senior year, and he was kind of a guy that had struggled a little bit when Galen and them here throwing the football, dropped a lot of balls apparently, but he didn't drop any under Coach Spurrier and Coach Dixon. And then my next couple of years, I had Harrison Houston, Aubrey Hill, Willie Jackson was my main guy. my senior year, I also had Jack Jackson, who was a freshman. So, the great thing about it was we practiced so much together throwing routes on air that there was never a worry from me as a quarterback, is this guy going to drop balls? I'll tell you a funny story. I'll never forget, when we were throwing 7-on-7 or whatever it is sometimes, Harrison Houston, he'd drop a lot of balls. And, Coach Spurrier's like, that's fine, as long as you catch it on Saturday. And I don't remember him ever dropping a ball, in a live action in a game. So he's one of those kind of guys. It was kind of like Danny wasn't great in practice, but with the real uniform on, he was outstanding. But, we had so many good receivers. And then, I had Ike on yesterday. I believe it was yesterday. All the days are running together.
I think it was yesterday.
And you think about his class, I think when he signed, it was him, Riedel, Travis McGriff, Jamie Richardson. But in that 95 and 96 time, they had 10 guys in that 10 or maybe more, 10 players in that receiver room that were just unbelievable college receivers.
HBC thinks Travis McGriff ought to be, like in the Ring of Honor because of his numbers he put up there and stuff. But
I will say this, buddy, Travis deserves to be in the University of Florida Football
Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Because one of my favorite trivia questions for Gator Clubs when you go, and a lot of people may not know this, we just named a ton of great receivers that have played here. The single season yardage record holder is Travis McGriff.
Yeah.
Most yards in one season.
That's amazing.
I think you can stump a lot of people with that trivia question.
You can, and that's one of the things that Steve Spurrier talks about. He's still got the yardage record and so on. So I was looking at this list all the way down, as I said, to reach Shea Caldwell, RIP, at 12. And there's a list online of all receivers on record that they have of catching the ball since 1956 or so. 411 guys. I looked at the whole list. Believe it or not, Shane, I've seen almost every single guy, all 411 of those guys.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking about who was the first great receiver I saw, and going back on it, I'd have to think about it a little bit. But one guy never gets talked about, Richard Trapp, was amazing. He was incredibly, after he caught the ball, he was like, he had rubber legs and he had good speed, good hands, a very underrated guy. But to me, there were so many good ones. Carlos was certainly one of those guys. And the one story that stands out to me about the triplets, as you call them, which I think is not often told enough. If you go back to the 96 championship team, you were gone by then, but they got beat in FSU in a very tough game. And pretty much everybody kissed them off and said they're done, except Danny Werfel, who said we're still got a chance to win a national championship. We all laughed. But the thing is that Ike had a horrible game. He admitted it later. He went up and apologized to Riedel for playing so poorly. By the way, neither one of the starting tackles played in that game. Florida lost it to FSU. But so Ike was really, really feeling bad. And Riedel told me the story. And so when they got into the championship game, it was obviously Ike's time. There was a play called, Spurrier told me they decided what to call up a certain route, and it was going to be open. And Spurrier talked about Riedel, and Riedel said, let Ike do that. He can get open on that one. Give it to Ike. And, of course, I don't know what play it was, but obviously he was successful. And that great stop on a dime play we all talk about in that game where he just sort of changed directions. And Ike had a fantastic game that day. And I love the unselfishness of that. Every receiver is always open. Every receiver always wants the ball. What made Riedel probably could have called a lot more balls had he been more selfish. But to have those three guys, three All-Americans, they weren't all All-American at the same time, but eventually Kwesi became an All-American, and Ike and Riedel. And every time I bring up the receiving corps of Florida and I talk about last year's, as I did a lot, I'm always reminded, but how about those three guys? Hey, look, as a group of three, I don't think you can get better than that. I don't think it's possible on a national championship team. But let me say this, and I want to get this is something you'll be familiar with. Florida is so fortunate to have Billy Gonzalez as a wide receiver coach. You got to get guys open. And one of the things they were having problems with the last few years, and I've talked to Spurrier about this as well, they couldn't get guys open. Couldn't get them open. And it sounds simple, but it's not simple. But the way they've gotten guys open is a tribute to what Billy Gonzalez has done, the route running and the discipline that goes with being a route runner, as you know. And the group they had last year, and someone said, well, they're going to be, they've lost their seniors. They're going to be in trouble this year. And I said, not so fast, my friend. They've got some pretty good players, sort of receivers coming back. And so I went and looked that up today. So they're very blessed to have the skill position has always been a staple of Florida football since, in recent 30 years or so. It fell off for a while there under a couple of coaches, Muschamp and McElwain. And to have players back now that you can put on the field that can score the ball, that can catch passes, can throw passes, that running backs that can run is the way it was back in your day and in Urban's day and so on and so forth. So these receivers are being groomed. I know you know a little bit about them because your son's on the team, but I'd like to talk about a few of them and say, when you say the receiver position falls off because of the four seniors, and I get that, not so fast, my friend. They got some players.
I agree. And I want to get to a Facebook Live question here brought to you by Pound Hurt, your preferred business interruption attorneys. Jeff says he wants to talk about the switch to the shotgun for Danny in the national championship game against FSU. And then we'll get back to receivers. Yeah, after that loss where, Danny took a pounding in Tallahassee, Coach went to the shotgun because of all the blitzing that Florida State did defensively with Mickey Andrews. And if you go back and watch that national title game, Florida State played man-to-man coverage, I would say 95% of the game. Danny took a beating out of the gun, but he was just throwing the ball to the open area, and the receivers were running to it and making plays. But that was a huge part, and smart on Coach Spurrier's standpoint, from changing to the shotgun allowed us to win the national title. Back to your comment about –
Well, I got a comment about that, if I may. All right, just real quick. I'm sorry. Just because, remember, they switched to it in the Alabama game. When the SEC put up big numbers is when they really
okay, you're right.
And I don't think they switched to the FSU game, but anyway, bottom line is the reason I think I know that. I have had this conversation with Steve. I don't have any influence with him, but I have said to him, I did say to him numerous times, why don't you run the shotgun? Because I've been covering Denver and John Elway and watched him succeed. People said you couldn't run out of the shotgun. Anyway, The reason I remember that was I remember Steve was obstinate about that. You know why he was so obstinate?
Well, he thought the quarterback took their eyes off the defense when the ball was snapped, because I used to beg for the shotgun. He actually went to the shotgun, I want to say, buddy, not after that FSU loss, as you mentioned. I want to say after the debacle and just the embarrassment. We couldn't get passes off against Nebraska in the Fiesta Bowl. I want to say the next year's when he went to the shotgun, but I can't remember. We'd have to have one of our listeners tell us exactly when he went to it. But It definitely helped. And, everybody got to play in the shotgun, all his quarterbacks except me. But it would have been fun to do that. But back to the current year's receiving core, I think they're going to be fine, buddy. I think with Trey Grimes coming back, I think Copeland got a lot of experience last year. Kadarius Toney is a unique individual to me. Nothing against him, but I think people try to make him to be something that he isn't right now. He's a tremendous athlete that can make things happen with the ball in his hands. I don't think he's a proven receiver at this standpoint, and he may not ever be, because if you look at his, he doesn't catch a whole lot of balls down the field. It's a lot of shallow crosses, slants, drags, those type things. But this Justin Shorter, who I think is going to be eligible, I'm not 100% sure. I've been told he's like a freak, big body guy that can run. Trent Whittemore is a kid from the area that I know very well. 6'4", extremely athletic, can jump, can run. People may want to compare him to Doring. He's a way better athlete than Doring. But they're going to be fine at the receiver position. You got C.J. Henderson's, Xavier Henderson, his little brother, who's be a true freshman that was highly recruited. And I'm sure there's some other ones that I left off, but I think they're going to be fine at the receiver position.
Well, I think Weston, right? Anthony Marks, People keep bringing up Justin Wells. I haven't seen it out of Justin Wells yet, but everybody talks about what he's going to do. Well, this is what, senior year? He's got to do it now. He hasn't got any more time. I agree on Whittemore. He's a heck of an athlete. He's a heck of a basketball player. I know the kid because he won the Scott Braley Trophy. I know his dad a little bit, not like you do. But if you take those names, and you didn't even mention Copeland, there's a guy that we don't know what he is, what he could be. Everybody seems to think he could be a freak. But if you put those guys, Tony Grimes, Copeland, Shorter, and don't forget, he's not a receiver. He's not a wide receiver, but Pitts was a receiver, last year's leading receiver. They have Kyle Pitts at tight end. It's really a gift. So you put those guys on the field in some combination, and you have a quarterback who can throw the ball accurately. And now maybe they got a guy who can run the football, which would be interesting to see if that all works out. This team could be offensively very good, but there's one thing about it, and I want you to tell me this. How much will missing spring ball hurt this offense?
Well, I think it hurts a little bit, especially getting some of the younger guys more reps. But when you look at the landscape of college football with nobody having spring football, I think if you want to say there's an advantage to some teams, I would say Florida is one of those teams that has an advantage going into the fall because of the quarterback guys that are returning, that are familiar with the system. That's the big thing, buddy, is, when you look at Georgia, not having a spring ball with a new offensive coordinator, learning new terminology, and I don't know how much they kept from a terminology standpoint from the previous guy. You got new quarterbacks. You can sit on Zoom meetings all you want, but translating the work from the Zoom meeting to the practice field and going out and executing, that's a big difference. And so I think, and I'm just using Florida, Georgia to compare. I think we have a huge advantage. I really do.
Talk about having a catchable ball. That's something they talked about. Said you had a catchable ball. Danny had a catchable ball. Kyle Trask has a catchable ball. And the one guy who talks about it a lot is Lee McGriff. He was on to Kyle a long time before a lot of us were. And I've told the story 100 times, but he puts the ball in a place where a receiver can get to it, and he throws a nice touch on it. And in fact, one of the games I was listening to while I was in the press box, I remember it was a touchdown pass. I forget who called it over the middle. It might have been, who was it? Post route. Anyway, he caught the ball beautifully over the middle, and Lee McGriff said, "Boy, I wish I could catch one of those balls." He blurted it out, and so receivers love those balls that have a right, so-called touch on them. And Trask seems to have that. Unlike Felipe, who I thought was a very good quarterback, by the way, and he gets unjustly criticized sometimes, but he was always throwing fastballs, it seems like,
Yes, there's more, it drives me crazy when you get ready for the drafts or kids coming out of high school talking about arm strength. And yes, some guys are blessed with arm strength, but the most important thing to me in a quarterback is accuracy and understanding the different pitches you have to throw. I don't care how great your arm is. If you throw a swing route to a back or a bubble or whatever, you throw it 100 miles an hour and it bangs off his chest or off his helmet. That ain't that guy's fault. That's your fault for throwing it so damn hard. It's a quarterback's, the object of a quarterback is throw completions, and you got to do it however you got to do it. So if a guy's wide open, don't throw it 100 miles an hour. And Kyle does a good job of that. I'm anxious to see Kyle play this year, buddy, because watching him play last year, the only thing I critique him from was, sometimes he held on the ball too long in the pocket. His feet were kind of slow. But I think I don't want to say he was overweight. He's just a big dude. But I think he's gotten in better shape during this quarantine. I've seen some video of him. His feet look a lot better.
Yeah, they do.
So I think talking to my son, he said Kyle's lost 15 pounds or so, which I think is going to help him be a little more athletic and be a little more nimble on his feet. But yeah, he throws a very catchable ball, which is important in playing the position of quarterback.
Yeah, we have not talked about the defense at all. Maybe next couple of weeks we'll do that because we don't know a lot. We haven't seen much. We're kind of going off memory. And here's the thing about this season, and I know you know this, there's so much unknown. and not just the health situation, which is enough not to know, but the whole situation with the new players. I mean, you know a little bit because your son's on the team, but we only hear about word of mouth, but we haven't seen these freshmen get enrolled. I mean, I heard Jacobian Frazier is just quite a tall dude, catches the ball well. I've seen video on whatever, but I haven't seen these guys, and I hate to talk about it without actually seeing them. So when we get to see some players, we'll have a better idea. Now, we don't get to see them. You get to see them because the media doesn't get to go to practice, but you get to go in as a former player. So I'm going to rely upon you heavily to tell me what you're seeing out there, and my friends like Travis McGriff or whatever to tell me. But I just got a good feeling about this team. They need some things to break right for them, but defense is something we have to start thinking about too. And I think they're going to be okay on defense as far as I can tell. Your thoughts?
No, I think they're going to be outstanding on defense. I think Florida should always be good on defense with the athletes we have in this state. Obviously, losing what John Grenard did last year will hurt us, and CJ was a tremendous corner. But I think we're going to be okay at that position. Buddy, we got a text here on the Titan More text line from Joe. He wants to know where Jesse Palmer ranks in the QBs in Florida history for Buddy.
Well, since you got 3 statues out front in there, that's for sure. He was a serviceable quarterback. He did some good things. I like Jesse's attitude. He would work well for Spurrier, as you heard him tell the stories about how he got rotated. I've forgotten how much he got rotated. I don't know how you do it. That if I was a quarterback, I wouldn't do too well at that. I think he's a really good player. I don't think he was a great player. He's not a Ring of Honor guy, but I think he's a really good in the stable of quarterbacks. He'd be top 10, 12, probably somewhere in there.
What's interesting is if you think about it, he rotated with Doug, who was a very good quarterback as well. He rotated with Rex, who was outstanding. So you take those 3, they kind of all overlapped one another. Mm-hmm. What would have happened, fast forward to today, if those 3 guys were on the roster? They wouldn't be hanging around the University of Florida. They'd be in the transfer portal.
Exactly. So there's when you start looking at numbers and touchdowns and championships and all that sort of stuff, you kind of got an elite group in there. You certainly are right up there with what you did. Not only that, you were a transformative player. I'm not just telling you that because you're the host of the show. It's different from having good numbers and being a transformative player. Danny Werfel Steve Spurrier was a transformative player. John Reeves was a transformative player. He just never got the opportunity to show it and get it in a championship game. And there's those transformative players, and there's probably on about 8 or 9 of them as quarterbacks, and you were one because you came in and you changed everything. You were the X factor. You had, they were good, but they wouldn't have been nearly as good if you hadn't been so accurate and you hadn't known the offense so well and knew how to throw the football. So, yeah, transformative players are few and far between. You better hang on to them and hug them because we went 8 years without a quarterback around here for a while. People saying, wait a minute, where are all the statues coming? So, yeah, transformative is one, good player is another.
All right, buddy. Well, we appreciate you joining the show. Let everybody know I'm going to be on with you tonight.
Yeah.
Who else you got on tonight?
Yeah, we're going to have on, let's see who's my schedule looking at right now. I've got David Moulton from down in Southwest Florida will be joining on. He's coming back from surgery. And I'll have Robbie Andrew from the Gainesville Sun and you. So we should be able to get some good stuff tonight. And look forward to having you on the show. And thanks for having me on, Shane.
Absolutely. That's Buddy Martin. Join us. You can follow him on Twitter @BuddyShow. Take care, buddy.
Take care, Shane.
All right. Hey, folks, you can refresh your vehicle and your brand with a vehicle wrap from WrapSpot. June is your lucky month at WrapSpot. Mention promo code Shane and receive 13% off your vehicle wrap. Visit them at wrapspot.com today. And that's going to be a wrap for today's show, folks. We want to thank Jesse Palmer taking the time and Buddy Martin joining the show. Tomorrow we have Jason Odom, former offensive lineman for me and Danny Werfel, played as a true freshman, and we'll be joined by Heath Klein as well. Take care out there, folks. We'll see you tomorrow.